Yeah, ideal. Good. Hello, sir.
Yes. Hi everyone, how are we doing?
Good. We good. Um,
It's very good to see you, Jacob. You doing well?
yeah, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. We're finally here. We finally made it.
It's taken a while. Nice to meet you, Joel.
Nice to meet you, man. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's hope you do as well, eh?
Yeah.
I've been interviewed in a very long time.
Wait, have you been interviewed before then?
I've been on a few podcasts for work, but it's been a very, very long time. So yeah, I'm interested to see what we can get up to.
What do you do for work?
I'm currently the multiple sclerosis coordinator at Torrey Hospital.
Damn.
I've previously worked in clinical research over at Exeter. And before that, I was Jacob's boss, like my restaurant.
Damn. Oh, that's sick, man. Stressful though, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask anyone, it's just a very stressful time of it. But yeah, the work I've done is pretty cool, pretty interesting. So
Wait, so what's your role at Torby Hospital?
I'm currently running a few research studies. With a group of patients with multiple sclerosis. It's a neurodegenerative disease. So I've been helping to build a online self-management platform, as well as working on some augmented reality stuff. The team from Stratford. So yeah, it's keeping me very busy. So I'm happy to talk about that.
No, that sounds interesting. But that's a bit of a change from hospitality.
I mean, it definitely is a change of hospitality, but it's all about talking to people, right? So,
But that's the sort of thing you wanted to do, like originally from your degree. But
yeah, I mean, psychology has always been an absolute passion of mine, and research is definitely a big part of that. So I'm happy to be putting my degree to use. But I also think with psychology, you can put that to use pretty much like any way you go.
Yeah.
Hospitality, it was about making people feel like warm and welcome, and like they were, even though they've just gone for a pint, it's like they are part of something, and you're providing that. Like, that's a nice feeling to have.
Yeah, I see psychology as like the study of life itself, really, because we live our lives through the lens of our own psychology. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
our experience it's kind of be filtered through the way our mind is set. And that's how we see and experience the world, and how we connect with other people, and how we kind of how we think about our own lives in terms of our progression as a person, and where we want to go, and whether we like what we're doing or we don't like what we're doing, and everything. It's all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think psychology is one of the few sort of disciplines in which, by learning more about psychology, you really do have an opportunity to learn more about yourself. You really get to equip yourself with a lot of tools to take that introspective approach. Whereas I feel like, you know, most other sciences are definitely outward looking, and a lot of the things that are studied in what I would call like the traditional sciences are very physical, tangible things, very, very easily measurable experiences and subjective research. Whereas a lot of psychology is almost investigating the invisible in a sense, where you're making assumptions about how things work, and then through scientific empirical research, you're able to sort of quantify those. But a lot of that process is hidden, and it's a very interesting thing to be able to look at, I think.
Yeah, because aspects of our experience, or pretty much our whole experience, isn't really tangible or measurable. And I think if you try and view life, I think the scientific view of life is obviously incredibly useful because it's led to the technological revolution and all that. But in terms of like on an individual level, we don't see the world as like cells, molecules, and interacting, and the physical forces. We are social animals with drives, but also this higher order thinking that somehow human beings are blessed with. It doesn't seem like other animals are. So it's like, that's why my favorite branches of psychology are like the existential phenomenological side of things, where it is just about the person's experience, and the way to understand someone and help someone and explain their behavior is by thinking about how their experience is in their own context, you know.
Yeah, I think my first sort of introductions to psychology were through a philosophical lens. I was really interested in sort of consciousness and the idea of free will being in my own hands from that very existentialist point. I got really into Sartre and things like that at a very early age, which is always a nice gateway to sort of your own experience, I think. But I completely understand the existentialist side of psychology. I think it's such an interesting subject to really delve into, because the impact of the things you learn are very personal. They offer a lot of insight into your own life and how you can inform the decisions and actions that you make in your life. So I think, unlike other sides of it, really does just give you a sort of toolbox to navigate life and the human experience. And I think my psychology degree, even the less scientific aspects of it, like research literacy and being able to spot misinformation and things like that from a mile off, are things that I use in my day-to-day life consistently. And that's not even necessarily a psychological concept. So I think the study of psychology really has a benefit to everyone of all levels, basically. I think it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, fantastic. When you were kind of interested in that free will thing, what started that, and then what are your views on that now? Because obviously it's years on from when you were first properly invested in those things.
So that was 16. So that's 10 years ago for me. So it's been quite a long journey of self-discovery. But I think what started it was I was raised religious. I was raised Roman Catholic. There was always a lot of questions about like the true existence of a higher power and things like that. And I noticed a lot of this like differences and disparities within the stories and things like that. And when I started to learn about existentialism and things like that, I started to realize that it shouldn't be about looking outwards like that to get answers. It really is about looking inside yourself, taking that introspective lens. And I think that was a real turning point for me in terms of my approach to navigating life and navigating the choices that I make. I was in quite a rough spot. I think I was quite mentally unwell at one point. I was quite suffering with depression and anxiety, and to be able to look at that from the lens of I actually have the ability to change that. I have the ability to get myself from this place to the place that I would like to be. That was a big turning point for me in free will. And having developed further on from that, I think it's quite... I was looking at this sort of be or an end all of like, I want to get to this point. It's up to me to get to this point. But I've also now given myself a bit of a break. You know, things happen in life. You're not always going to be going to plan. So you do have free will. Free will could be completely overwhelming at times. But I think it's also important to appreciate the self-care that has to go along with that journey that you go through. And that's, you know, everyone's experience of life is different. But it is up to you to hopefully make the right choices. And that is a learning process. You're going to be doing that until the day you're in the ground, basically.
Can you just help me understand what existentialism is?
Okay, so existentialism is a philosophical concept that essentially goes against the idea that life is predetermined and there is a set course for you throughout your life. So existentialism opposes the idea that you are where you are in life, you are who you are in your life because of the choices that you've made.
So it's kind of the argument of free will versus everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, that's essentially what it boils down to. I mean, Sartre was probably the most famous sort of writer that was producing rich literary works around existentialism, but he made a very big splash. He was a prisoner of war during World War II and had this realization while he was, locked up that his own choices have gotten to this point. A very famous quote was that he never felt more free than when he did when he was in prison after making that like realization that his choices brought him to that point. He then started to go off the rails, lots of drug use, and most people do in these cases, philosophers and psychologists. But he has lots of interesting quotes like hell is other people and things like this. You know, he was very much about personal experience and, you know, sort of building yourself up to the point and taking accountability for your actions and things like that. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic to get behind, but I'll warn you, the literature is quite intense to get through.
So it sounds like you kind of improved your situation by taking control and accountability for your own life. How did you sort of improve that? Was it small sort of steps you took? Because as long as I've known you, you've always been very enthusiastic, quite confident, but I'm guessing this didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, I was very hard on myself. I wanted to be a better person, to be a much healthier, happier space. But part of that process is realizing that, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. And especially, like, it's helped me working within mental health and being in an environment of people that, you know, give support to people with mental health issues. You learn a lot about sort of the general approach to improving mental health care, and it's having these big goals, setting these big sort of milestones for you to get through and achieve. It sounds good in principle, but the reality is that if you set a goal that is unachievable, or set a goal that is too grand for, you know, where you're at in current time, it can actually have an inverse effect on bettering yourself, because you feel defeated, you feel dejected for not ever reaching that or not getting close to reaching that. So I think the importance of it is actually managing much smaller and much more manageable goals. You know, I talked about this with my mental health journey. There's times where just getting out of bed, it's tough. Brushing your teeth, having a shower can be, you know, like climbing a mountain for some people. So it's not about waking up one day and being like, oh, I'm going to get a new job, I'm going to make £1 million by the end of the year. It's about, you know, just taking those first steps into bettering yourself, and then the rest all does fall into place. And that's also a really good point, that the people that maybe don't experience mental health issues, that for your friends and family that may be struggling, go easy on them, because even things like getting out of bed can be like a genuinely hard thing to do for many people. So to see it from that point of view as well, it also helps other people, you know, get them the support.
And it's quite hard to understand, isn't it? Because we live our lives through our own subjective experience. So it's difficult to understand and comprehend the concept that a thing like getting out of bed can be so difficult for one person, when the other person maybe just be naturally predisposed to not having these like nihilistic thoughts and drives that make getting out of bed such difficult things. That's why it's so hard to navigate that kind of situation. I just want to come back to a point you made about free will that I think is quite interesting. Is like, I found that my life got better proportionally to the amount of like agency I viewed myself to have. And even people who claim that free will maybe doesn't objectively exist because everything that you experience is because of your upbringing, or you don't decide where your thoughts come from and things like that. I think the more important point is we treat ourselves, and it seems like society views us as having free will, like in the judicial system and things like that. And I think it's better to live as if free will is the case, whether it's like actually true or not. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously we're going to be constrained by rules imposed by society. I find it quite interesting you said your life's become much better now after you discovered your own agency. What would you say was like the catalyst behind you finding agency or having a heightened sense of agency?
I mean, if I look at my life, or more like my life philosophy, the main time when it changed was lockdown, which kind of, I think a lot of people share a similar story to that, because it gave us more time to introspect and figure out who we thought we were, who we wanted to be, and where we wanted to take our lives going forward. And I think I had some mental difficulties there, but the way I coped was through trying harder at things, right?
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize that what I was gonna discover on that journey, I think it was just my coping mechanism, because like everything in my life that I thought I had control over and that I enjoyed was taken away from me. So like as a defense mechanism, I was like, right, there's schoolwork to do. I'm going to try really hard. So it was probably like my GCSEs, and that was like, lockdown for me was March of year 10. So end of year 10 and year 11 was like lockdown. So like I tried really, really hard for my exams and did really, really well in my GCSEs. And I think that made me realize and notice a cause and effect relationship between I tried really hard at something and I benefited. And those grades that I have, whether it doesn't matter what I got in GCSE maths. Like I don't think about that day to day, or like GCSE music. It doesn't affect me whatsoever. It's more the fact that is evidence that if I apply myself to a thing and it goes well, then I benefit. And you can apply that philosophy to absolutely everything else. And I think it's better to view that way. So I think about that with my mental health, with my uni work now, with the stuff I'm trying to build, with my sport as an athlete. It's like, if you just have the thought process that what I do equals my outcomes, and we know obviously there's different factors that we can't control that influence that too. But if that's your baseline belief, then actually the power then for your life comes into your own hands. And that can be hugely uplifting to people, because I think the worst thing, I think depression really is helplessness. It's I'm not in a good situation, I don't feel good, and I don't know how to get out. Because if you're feeling bad and you know how to get out, you're just sad, right? Because you can find a way, you can put certain actions in place and get out of that dark place, right? But if you're feeling awful and you don't see a route out, that's true depression, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I'd probably start with, I'm still very proud of my new GCSE. I think being locked down at such a formative age, it's definitely going to be a difficult challenge to overcome. A lot of the developmental psychology, you know, that sort of age bracket that you're in, that's really, really key for developing self-identity. You know, Erickson talks about this, Young briefly touched on it, Older touched on it as well. It's an incredibly introspective time. And going back to saying that you're sort of limited in terms of free will based off society, and also another point is that your family environment, you internalize a lot of those rules. This is what Freud talked about with the superego and things like that. But at the age you are, the age you were during lockdown, that is when you start looking outward. You look for another system of rules and regulations to put in place. And this is why I often talk about internalizing your parents and parental values. Not many people talk about you actually internalize the values of the group that you have around you when you're younger. That's why it's often seen like during early teen years, like the rebellious era, things like that, because you're navigating the world for yourself realistically for the first time. You know, you're realizing that actually some rules can be broken, or some values that are really valuable to you throughout your childhood and your family actually aren't that valuable to other people, or that valuable in society. So I can completely understand why you have this sort of revelation at that age, because that is a time when you're really figuring out who you are. And it's, you know, everyone experienced lockdown differently. So I think to come out of lockdown with that sort of revelation of you get in what you put out, and the more that you work and the more you value your own energy and you value your own accomplishment, that's a really positive thing to come out of such a rough time to go through. So I think that's really, you know, commendable. But I also agree with what you said about depression. It is a feeling of hopelessness, but it's a suffocating feeling of hopelessness. It's like you said, it's more than being sad. It's more than being down. It is the very energy that makes you who you are is sapped away from you slowly, and that is a horrible, horrible thing to experience, and especially a horrible, horrible experience to go through alone. So I would highly encourage anyone that does feel like they are struggling with their mental health, reach out to your friends and family. I was very sort of reclusive when I was going through like a rough patch. I think a lot of people are. It's not a common experience. So I did speak to my friends or family really about anything, especially not my mental health. But to say that speaking to like my friends and family and being honest about how I'm feeling wasn't a massive help for me. Just getting that feeling off my chest. Yeah, that was an invaluable experience for me. Really, just that's enough. Just sometimes just talking about something is enough.
Yeah, because it can get much bigger in your head, can't it? And it's the mind isn't necessarily a rational playground for thoughts. Like, talking about it with someone else kind of allows you to work through it in your own mind, and they can play off you with ideas of why you might be feeling this way, and how it isn't your fault, and it's not. It's a normal kind of part of it's baked into the human life that we have times where we feel hopeless, and then I think that's really a route one to feeling better, isn't it? Is like, because also keeping something in your mind like that, it's kind of a way of ignoring that it's there, because once you talk about it, you now can't hold up this frame that you're not suffering. So once you tell someone, it's real then. It's like it's something that actually happens in you. You can't pretend that it's not there anymore. But that's necessary to find any growth and any light at the end of that tunnel, you know?
Oh, I completely agree. I think having the first call with my GP and having like a plan put in place, even if it was like probably a 4-minute phone call, if that. I started to wait an hour and a half to get onto reception, but it was walking away from that phone call, I was just like, I've already done something. I already feel like lighter, just knowing that something's actually being done about it. I think that was a huge relief for me. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, and you can argue that links to the idea that like you took agency and started to like make actions towards changing how you felt, even if it was just a 4-minute phone call with the GP. Like that was something, like a step forward, a small step forward into a better place.
You know? Yeah, and this feeds back into what I was saying about how it's not always going to be a straightforward journey. It's a very common thing in mental health care to say that the mental health journey is never linear. Sometimes you're going to have really good days, and then sometimes you might feel worse than you did before. I think it's sort of the same thing with free will. You know, you may be completely motivated to achieve all these things at one point in your life, then something can really set you back. I think it's just really important to try and keep that in your mind of where hiccups aren't permanent and minor step backs. If you just keep sort of having that or trying to find that motivation to keep moving forward, then that's the way to get through life.
How's your mental health now, Finn?
It's much better now. I'm on medication, which is very helpful. It's not for everyone, but I feel like a lot of my mental health journey was, I thought that these negative feelings that I was going through was just a sadness, like Joel was saying. But it took me until the age of about 20, 21 to realise that it's definitely more than that. I thought my sadness was reactionary to things that were going on in my life. But then I started to go through periods where actually nothing was happening and I still felt like that. So I started to understand a bit more about what depression really can be, and I feel like depression can have many causes, whether that is biological or because of events that have taken place in your life. I feel like I more err on the side of biological. I am just lacking neurotransmitters in my brain. So my medication helps alleviate that massively by helping that chemical imbalance. Obviously, for some people, therapy is going to help more if it's something to do with events in their life. But I think, the issue with mental health care is there's no real clear, direct route to fixing it like there is with conventional medicine. If you go in with a broken arm, you're not going to get you're not going to talk someone out of that. You're also not going to be given 4 different approaches to care. They're just going to fix your arm and let you walk out. But with mental health, there's so many potential underlying causes that have to go into actually combating the source of the problem.
And that's interesting because I haven't really considered depression being biological before. I would normally think it would be just an extreme sadness. So you can get depressed because of having, did you say less neurotransmitters or?
Yeah, so neurotransmitters are chemical messages that help facilitate communication between synapses, so the nerve cells in your brain. So at the end of a neuron and the start of a neuron is a bridge called a synapse. So what a neurotransmitter would do, it gets released from one end and then attaches to a receptor on the other end. And then that causes an electrical signal to carry on. Now, different neurotransmitters have different effects on the body. So like dopamine is a neurotransmitter. Serotonin is probably the biggest one that's involved in emotion regulation. So for some people, they may have fewer receptors. So there's less of a build-up of, or there's less serotonin actually being activated in the brain. For some people, there's just a lower level of serotonin produced. But what most medication does for depression is something called a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or SSRI. What that does is it binds to the receptors in the brain, causing the serotonin that's released to not be able to be attached to the receptors and then break down. So it actually causes a build-up of serotonin within the synapses. Because you have more serotonin present, you feel more of the uplifting effect.
So is the answer to get more serotonin?
Yeah, you basically want more serotonin in your brain.
But then can't you get, well, actually, I was going to ask a stupid question that's like, can't you just eat chocolate and then you'll be happy?
So that would be...
or is that more dopamine?
That would be dopamine, yeah. Dopamine.
But that won't do the job.
No, so dopamine is from a quick hit sort of thing, where serotonin is like more of a long burner.
Yeah, and dopamine's an excitatory neurotransmitter, so it causes the next neuron to fire, whereas serotonin's an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it stops the next neuron from firing. So dopamine is more like it's like the pleasure chemical, that's the hit of good feeling you get when you eat chocolate, right? But serotonin is more like a calming the brain down. And it's like the way I like to think about it is if you're constantly overthinking, and then you're overthinking about why you're overthinking, or you're feeling sad and distressed, and you're becoming more distressed because you're distressed that you're distressed, the serotonin slows that down because it increases the neural inhibition, so it slows down the firing in your brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, so what you want to aim for actually is more serotonin, and how do you get that?
So, I mean, there's lots of sort of magic medicines you can take, like 5-HTP is supposed to help produce serotonin, assist in serotonin production. Diet is a really important thing. because it helps give you the basic proteins that are used to build neurotransmitters. So foods like teleki is supposed to be really good for you, just to name one. Also, things like exercise can help not necessarily produce serotonin, but it helps with brain health. So you're going to be able to have the facilities to make more serotonin. And sleep again is a very important thing. I think it's very common in, all aspects of health to be told that like food, exercise, and sleep are massively important. And coming from someone that experiences mental health difficulties, getting a good night's sleep regularly, having a consistent and healthy diet, and making an effort to exercise regularly, I can't understate the actual positive impact that has. And I know it's something really, really commonsensical, but I think a lot of people actually don't realise how important that is.
Yeah, I think 80% of the solution is lifestyle. I feel like unless you're in a catastrophic, like a loved one's just died or whatever, if you're living out your normal life, having those three things in order is like 80% of the solution. Yeah. Some other interesting bits about serotonin though, like it also is linked to like body language and things like that, and also like how you perceive yourself to be in like the social hierarchy, and that's why getting good at stuff and becoming more skillful and competent makes us feel better. And because really the way I see serotonin is it slows down the self-consciousness. That is a lot, that is the key ingredient behind a lot of mental afflictions. It's like this anxiety is thinking about you and worrying about your position in the world and how something might go and how you might be perceived. So the serotonin slows that down, and maybe the link between that and social status or whatever is that once you have a kind of positive self-image because of how you've been in the world and the things you've done, then you gain access to more serotonin to slow down those self-consciousness processes, if you get what I mean.
But that was also the first chapter in Peterson's book when he talks about the lobster analogy.
Yeah, and how we have the same neural mechanisms to animals that have been around for hundreds of millions of years,
And they raise their serotonin by being more competent.
Well, for lobsters, it's when they win fights, right? Because that rises them up in the hierarchy. Luckily, human beings don't do that. Luckily, we're not fighting for our position in the hierarchy. It's more like this. The human hierarchy is so much more complex, because if you look at the animal world, it's basically just about who gets access to females to then spread their genes. And you can, if you're evolutionary, if you have evolutionary assumptions, you could say that human society is the same, but I don't think it is. I think we exist upon thousands of different hierarchies. That's why we have carpenters and artists and teachers and musicians, people within their own competence hierarchy. Do you get what I mean? So it's just becoming good at stuff, getting better at things, that just makes you feel good.
Yeah, I think I would argue that humans are definitely fighting for their place in social hierarchy. And I think the concepts you talked about are completely accurate and completely valid, but I think some of them more so within a vacuum, because especially today with the impact of social media and things like that, where people put so much pressure on themselves to have an audience and have people engage with them and have their lives viewed through this sort of crowd lens. I think that makes it much more difficult for people to feel with their idea of their place in society.
Also, sorry, Karen. Well, I was just going to say, because the what we see online isn't even real, because it's someone's highlights of their life. It's not their life. Exactly. So you see all the parts of your life, the thoughts you wish you didn't have, the things you wish you didn't do, the complex emotions that you have to battle through. Like, people aren't putting that on their Instagram story. They're putting it when they're at the zoo, taking photos, or when they're with the best friends, or the nice car they're driving, or the holiday they're on. That's not life. That's a tiny fragment that they've purposefully, superficially constructed to appear as if they're in some place in the hierarchy. And you're right, that's why there's quite blurred lines to know where you stand. And they actually found that, like, I saw there was a result from a study where they found they looked at guys, and the more time a guy spent on Instagram, the lower his testosterone was. There was like a correlation between them. I mean, that's quite mad, isn't it?
I would love to see a study on that.
I'll try and find it and email it to you or something.
Please do. Yeah, that sounds quite a strange one. But I think I studied the effect of social media video games at university.
Oh, I think we've lost him. Is he frozen for you as well, Jake?
Yeah. Phil, if you can hear me, you're frozen.
Sorry, we'll just wait there.
Might have to rejoin Heap in the chat. Yeah, that's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
What?
Well, there we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
But what I was saying was, I think the idea of competency and getting better at things and things of that nature, it's becoming a bit more difficult now with the rise of social media, because I think people feel an immense pressure to be immediately good at something. Or what I've noticed is they feel the need to monetize a hobby as opposed to enjoy the process of learning it. And I don't, the irony of this all is not lost on me. I recently created a social media mental health account, and you're making a podcast, so you're looking for the audience as well. But a lot of people are missing the point of hobbies, or learning a craft, or learning something for the sake of learning, and skipping immediately to having to monetize something or having to receive engagement from something. And I think that's sort of something that's slowly becoming lost in modern online society.
Because you also argue, though, that you can do something and get better just for the purpose of getting better. So
yeah, I think that's what's being lost.
Right. Okay. So you think most people's drive to do the things they do is like extrinsic motivation for the social validation and how it appears, rather than how it actually feels, rather than like intrinsically motivated.
Yeah, I think that's something that's sort of a problem with social media, is that it is becoming a bit sort of this constant feedback loop of, I need to post things so that people engage, so I get that sort of dopamine rush from it. And like I was saying, I studied social media video games. For any positive effect that social media has, there is also an inversely horrendously negative effect it has. So it's not a blanket statement to say that people are just losing interest in hobbies and learning things, because there's other people that are using the internet as a tool to learn things and find new hobbies. That's an incredibly valuable thing to have. But I do sense that is sort of the direction that people are going in. But like you said, it's not an intrinsic motivation, it's extrinsic.
How about video games then? Would you say video games are bad for you, or?
No, I think it's so difficult with social media video games, because, especially social media, because it's new. We haven't had social media long enough to really have a longitudinal analysis of it, and social media is in such a state that it's evolving so quickly. The people that are using it so differently in a short space of time. There's not really a consistent use of social media to really measure. So I wouldn't say that social media or video games are necessarily good or bad, there's definitely good parts and bad parts. If you love the video games, boosting moves, help with concentration, it can help increase reaction time, the speed, things like that. But then also there's studies linked to video games causing aggression. It's also, especially games like GTA, things like that, are showing younger kids more graphic content because their parents aren't, taking any notice of the age barrier on or anything. So it's difficult to say whether something's like inherently good or inherently bad, especially when the content that people are viewing and the way that they're digesting it is so vastly different.
When you said, Joel, that we have like thousands of different hierarchies, surely social media goes against that and just puts everyone in one hierarchy for how many followers they have and their status.
I agree, but I think I don't think every hierarchy is built the same. I think that's a poor, superficial way to look at your life. Like, really, if your value system is how many followers do I have, you're kind of destined to be unhappy because you can't really control that. What I meant by that is like, my flatmate is a law student and he gets his good feelings from being better, from working hard at his degree and maybe becoming employed as a lawyer at a law firm. But I get that from being a better basketball player. But like, they're very different because I can be a really good basketball player, but that doesn't mean I know anything about law and I could be a lawyer. But we're getting the same thing from it. We're getting the same like self-esteem boost, if you know what I mean, from improving. And I agree with the point that if he was motivated just by the paycheck, then he's not going to feel great. And if I'm motivated just for the medals, then it's not going to be great. But if you're motivated by the self-discovery through trying to excel at a hard thing, then you see, like, reap the rewards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was really well put. I think what you're talking about, Jacob, there in a single hierarchy of like follower count, I would argue there's a definite separation between your own persona and online persona. There's a term unknowingly coined by KSI, but it's now used in research. I don't think he has any idea of this. It's this idea of something called an attention economy, where the online space, especially for creators, is all about just getting as many people viewing and engaging and taking their attention as possible. And that's where you see sort of very high level influencers where they're posting like shock content and clickbait. And, you look at Mr. Beast, he's going to Africa and like curing blindness in people, you're constantly having to elevate this to increase your viewership. And I think that on a commercial large scale for these creators seems obvious, but I think the trickle down effect of that is you have people with like a 600 follower account that are also doing the same, even though there's no real need for it. It's building that online persona, even though it might be completely polar opposite from who you are in real life, and you're not even getting the paycheck for it. It seems like people feel like they have to do this because it is an online space. It's what people seem to be doing.
There's a quote from Naval Ravikant that I love where he says, "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes," and it's that same idea. Like, yeah, I agree with you. And I've had to think about it with my own. I make YouTube videos around psychology and mental health and performance and stuff, and I have to constantly watch to not have my ego hijack and get in the way and care so much about how videos perform, when it should be about sharing information that I care about and like building a stack of proof that that what I've been learning can be applied to life and can improve things, even if it helps just one or two people. And that should be the mindset that I play out with. But it's hard, when we're all struck with this ego that wants to be so socially validated. So, and if you don't have the self-awareness to see that, then that's where you can be stuck playing stupid games for stupid prizes.
Yeah, I think, this goes back again to what I was saying of everyone feels like we need an audience, and we simply don't. I think living a quiet, introspective life is far more beneficial than living an extremely public and extroverted life. I think what you're doing is it's fantastic, helping people with mental health and sharing what you've learned and making it more digestible for people. I think that's a fantastic thing to do, but I do understand it's so easy to get sucked into that sort of analytical feedback loop. You want success, you want to do well because that's what you're encouraged to do in everything that you do, right? But it's not something that can simply be achieved by doing. There's so many factors at play, especially with online spaces, that you could post a video every day and put your heart and soul into it, but unless the algorithm picks you up, you're never going to get that. It's so inverse to the usual put the work in, get the results, because there's so many individual factors at play that could potentially work against you. It's such a difficult thing to be a part of. I completely. Yeah, it's tough.
And it's also very easy to say that your motivation is one thing when really it's another. And I think it takes an honest look at yourself to be like, why am I actually doing this thing?
I think it's very easy to slip from that original of wanting to help people, wanting to share knowledge. It's very easy to switch from that to actually I do want fame and people talking about me like that. I think it can be a very slippery slope if you're not completely sure of yourself and the reasons why you're doing it.
So fame is it is very flawed. That's why people say it's not actually nice to be famous, because everything's public and there's a lack of privacy.
I mean, I can't speak to fame.
Yeah.
I'm not a famous person, but I think what is important to know about fame and celebrity status is that just because people have an audience and people look up to them doesn't necessarily mean that they're living this lavish lifestyle. Countless bands that I saw when I was younger, I thought they were because they were going on world tours and stuff like that, I thought they must be absolutely rolling in it. But the reality is they come home and they work second jobs because they can't afford to pay their mortgage. The disguise of celebrity status is actually not really that. People aren't really living this life of comfort that I think a lot of social media and stories allude to. Obviously, I can imagine that having no privacy and constantly being on the radar of having a photo taken and things like that, I imagine it must take a massive toll because you're not built for that.
Didn't I see a picture of you meeting Joe Weller?
No, it is Tom.
Oh, Tom.
My friend Tom, yeah.
What did he say about that?
I mean, when I was traveling, you sort of come across so many people that are like, "Oh, I saw Joe Weller here. I saw Joe Weller here," and we were like, "No, you haven't." And then he just pops up next to you at a bar somewhere. Tom said he was, an interesting guy. Lots of people around him, taking a lot of photos. Which I imagine is pretty rough considering you're out on holidays trying to have fun and you're just being hounded by people wherever you go. But yeah, it's an interesting story, right?
What did traveling broaden your mind, as they say?
Yeah, it's the second time I've been to Thailand. I'd recommend traveling to anyone. I think it's a very, very important thing to do to get out of your sort of bubble and experience different cultures. And the people you meet while traveling as well, I think, is a massive part of it. I would say that although I went to some amazingly beautiful places and did some amazingly incredible things, I think I always come back to speaking about the people that I'd met while out on these trips, as opposed to where I was or what I was doing. I'd met so many incredible people. I'd met people that are now quite high up in mental health care teams in the UK, and they helped me with my job applications and things like that. And I've met people who are multi-millionaires with like property empires, and yet they will be so down to earth, so just like open to like sharing their story and listening to yours. I think the traveling community is a lot more part of the experience for me. I think, if you go on holiday, the likelihood of meeting a very drunk British person who will be wearing a football shirt, he will probably be starting a fight by the end of the night, very, very high. They're only out there for one reason, it's to get drunk. Whereas traveling, it's a lot more of a self-exploration as well as a global exploration. And I think that's really reflected in the type of people that you meet.
So there might be a couple people who are taking gap years that are listening and stuff. And if someone wants to go traveling and they want to meet people, how do you sort of go about it? Do you just kind of...
It's a very good question, but it's especially, it can seem like quite an overwhelming experience at the start, especially because most people in the UK that go on holiday are most likely to stay within Europe, where it's like an hour or two flight. My first time I went to Thailand was 28 hours of flying, 3 different flights, and I was on my own, so that was terrifying. But I would recommend staying in hostels. Hostel World is a fantastic website and application. You can look at reviews for each hostel, and you can also see who's staying there, like what country they're from. I think it's really helpful for like planning on meeting people. I would also recommend you can use these sort of pre-planned travel packages where they take you on like a 2-week tour of loads of places. But I would recommend booking a one-night flight and then planning it from like the first hostel, because you're going to be meeting people that you're probably going to be seeing quite regularly. We met one group on the first night being in Thailand on my second trip. I think we saw them maybe 6 or 7 other times, like across the country. So you're likely to be sort of following the same route as people, but you may want to stay another day in somewhere, or maybe stay another week. There's a place called Pai in northern Thailand, which is like one of the most beautiful and like calm, quiet places I've ever been to. And people call it getting stuck in the pie hole, because once you visit, everyone, I mean everyone, extends their stay for like another week, because it is just the nicest place to be. So having that, being open to being flexible in travel plans is really important. And I also think you can also find like travel groups and stuff on Facebook, and just be open to really hang out with people, meeting people, and also hang out with people you probably wouldn't expect you'd be hanging out with. I think it is really just about sort of taking the whole experience as one big trip, I guess.
So you meet people in hostels mostly, and it's best to sort of take a one-way flight and then just see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound too safe when you say it like that, but it really is. In most places that people are traveling, so like Australia, Southeast Asia, even Europe, so many other people are doing exactly what you're doing, and hostels are the cheapest places to stay. So you're going to be, in a building that is encouraging, people being social. It's the best place to meet people, because I remember one night I was on my own in Thailand. I was sat at a table. I just checked into the hostel. I had a girl and her partner walk up to me and go, "We're out for dinner in here. Do you want to come join us?" Like, you'd never do that down here. You'd never just see someone sat on their own and go like, "Do you want to join me and my girlfriend for dinner?" Like, that just doesn't happen. I'm like, I'd sat at a table and then one person's like, "Oh, do you want if I sit here and talk to you?" Like, yeah, that's fine. And then like 2 hours later, there's like 16 people at this table, and we're all just chatting away about like what we do back home, or like where we've been. It's just the sense of community I've had traveling it's unmatched. It's just the most pro-social experience of my life.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'd recommend traveling to anyone. It's life-changing experience.
Well, yeah, it definitely makes you want to do it a lot. The problem is like money, isn't it? Because like if I could work, yeah, if I could have like a income source and then travel, that's like a dream. Do you know what I mean?
So when I went the first time, it was very much like people are just traveling for the sake of traveling. But since COVID and the ability to work remotely, I've never seen so many people in like pubs and bars, like on Zoom calls, on MS Teams to their offices back home, and they'll just close their laptop and then just like grab a beer and go out. The flexibility to now work while you're traveling it's the impact's definitely there, as well as the amount of travel influences that are around now. Like, you can't go on a beach without seeing someone flying a drone somewhere, or see people trying to haggle for like free apartments because they have like an alright sized following on Instagram. So yeah, there's definitely like a Western influence taking over Thailand now, but it's still worth going, 100%.
And you find out more about yourself because is it sort of like you put yourself in situations where you normally wouldn't? So then,
yeah, I think when you're traveling, especially in a country that doesn't speak English, and a country that is so vastly dissimilar to England, you kind of have to just amalgamate yourself into that sort of culture. A huge culture shock for me, my first time in Bangkok, and the traffic's insane, the human traffic is insane. You look up and you can like barely see the sky because the buildings are just so tall. It was such a huge shock to the system for me, especially considering I just spent like 2 weeks on islands such as the beach ring. So it can be quite a shocking experience. It can be quite an eye-opening experience. It's almost like a sort of civilized survival that you have to sort of acclimatize to the world you're in, and know how to navigate it, and know how to access things if you need it. I mean, I got bit by a dog, had to get rabies treatment for like a month, and it's like Thai healthcare there is just so vastly different to English healthcare. I was sat in the waiting area in a car park, and then I finally got pulled through, and the nurses and doctors are like eating their dinner next to me while I'm laying in bed. It's and I had to pay for all that. Like it's crazy. So it's good life experience. I think it definitely teaches you a lot about like your independence and your survival and things like that.
Yeah, I guess you get to put yourself in scenarios full of things you wouldn't expect, and just watch how you respond, and watch parts of yourself you didn't know were there come out. Like in that situation where you're in a Thai hospital and the doctors are eating in dinner next to you, you've got to see how you respond in that scenario of stress and the unknown, and like you don't know whether this guy actually knows what he's on about, but you got to throw yourself in and kind of let go in a way and just trust, and it worked out all right, and now you've it's either a good time or a good story, and you've got a good story to tell. So
I had both. So but, yeah, I think like if most people, like if that happened and you're down like at home, like phone up a friend or like phone up your parents and be like, I need help, but you are just on your own out there. You're like 5,000 miles away from home, so it is sort of you just have to get on with it, really. But the good times that you have will infinitely outweigh the bad times. That's a fact. And there is bad times. It's not always easy. You're going to be on like 16-hour coaches with no aircon, or like your hostel is just horrendous, but it's all part of the experience. And I think in a lot of senses, people could be a bit too comfortable sometimes. So it's getting out of your comfort zone a bit, and it makes you appreciate sort of what you have in life a bit more, I think.
I want to pivot a little bit. This is testing my memory, but I think if I remember this right, you told me about a study that you did that I found very interesting.
Can't wait for one. I've told you so many stories.
So, alright, if I got this right, you did a study that found that we find fat people more attractive when we're hungry, right?
Okay, so I wouldn't word it like that. But one of the first studies I did was got people to rate people attractiveness on a scale. The lower end of the scale being a lower BMI and the higher end of the scale being a higher BMI. And found that people that were hungry tended to rate people with higher BMIs as more attractive. And if you'd recently eaten, you find people with lower BMIs less attractive. And what the idea of that being is that from like an evolutionary perspective, a person with a higher BMI would be perceived to have more resources available to potentially share. Whereas if you are sufficiently fed yourself, then you don't need the resources from other people, so you favour people with lower BMIs.
That makes sense.
I knew you were going to bring that up. Yesterday I was like, you should bring this up. But it's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, was that what you did in your last year of uni as like your research like project, or was there something big you did, or was that a study that was part of it?
That was literally my first research study in my first year.
Right. Okay. So you got to pick, and then
research is such a big part of psychology, as I'm sure you know, as a psychology student. So we had to take part in research to attain research credit. So I've taken part in like 30 different research studies. And then we also had to do regular like lab reports and experiments, usually for different statistical analysis, types of statistical analysis. But my final year, I looked at the psychological function of keeping secrets, which was very interesting. I got 120 people to tell them their deepest, darkest secrets, and then looked at the general themes that they were sort of laying on to. And then I essentially found that people of different age groups tend to hold secrets of different themes, and that those themes actually fed quite nicely into the issues that are experienced at each age bracket for Ericksons' theory of development, which is very interesting.
So what kind of themes were associated with each age group?
So for younger people, it tended to be lying to protect, or lying to sort of keep their own idea of self-perceived identity. And then as you get older, it tends to be lying about, say if you're like the 40 to 50 age bracket, lies tended to be to protect like family and friends, those around you. So it's quite a clear shift through Erickson's stage of development that as you get older, you're lying to protect yourself, and then that slowly moves towards the group, or the sort of foundation that you've been building throughout your life. It was quite interesting. I believe that research is still going on. I think it's being used as like a future avenue of study for students at my university, but it's very hard to...
Is that because like when you're younger, your self-image and sense of self is so malleable and like unconsolidated, it's still, you don't really know who you are or what you think you're here to do, so you kind of play a persona and then you maintain the secrets to maintain that, because that's what you think you are. And as you get older and you become more secure in yourself, you then put more focus on other people, preserving their
Exactly.
happiness and identity.
Exactly. So it's what we were talking about earlier about how when you're younger, you're developing that sense of self-identity. And I talk about perceived sense of self-identity because you may be putting on an act that actually has nothing to do with how you really do view yourself. And it sort of incorporates the idea of masking that Jung came up with about how we present ourselves differently in different situations. But it is exactly that, as you said, as you get older, you sort of cement who you really are. And then it's about protecting that empire that you yourself are building. So your friends and your family, or even, the job that you work for, things like that. It's about protecting yourself, yes, but about protecting those that you care about as well.
Can you explain to me Ericksons' theory, because I'm not familiar with it?
Okay, so it's a theory of development. So it basically breaks down different life stages. So like infancy, like childhood, adolescence, adulthood, late adulthood. And his theory was that you have to essentially progress through that life period and achieve a certain goal that is specific to that developmental stage. So for early adolescent or teenage years, Erickson's theory, the struggle, if you want to put it that way, is building self-identity. If you don't successfully navigate that part of your life, then you're going to be living with a less secure sense of self-identity, which then may lead to later problems in life. If you successfully navigate through that, then you leave with a strong sense of self-identity. I can send you the paper if you like after. It's quite interesting. I think it's moved on from sort of Freud and Jung's structural psychology theories and moved more towards ego psychology, which is much more introspective and looks at the individual's experience through life as opposed to the sort of universal experience of life. So it's very interesting. I think it was written in like the 1950s, but it still holds quite true today. Yeah.
And what's the stage after the teenage identity? Sort of 20s or
so, it's been quite some time since I'm not sure. It's been a while. Yeah, so it's sort of a fluid state of ego identity is what they talked about. So you've got infancy, which is 0 to 1. Early childhood is 1 to 3. Play age, which is 3.3 to 6 years. School age, adolescence, early adulthood, middle age, and old age. So he talks about this idea of basic conflict, which is those issues I was talking to you about. So in adolescence, it's identity versus confusion. And then the way that you go around that is sort of experimenting with your identity and the roles that you play within different groups. And then you've got early adulthood, which is intimacy versus isolation. So you establish intimate relationships with other people. And this again reflects sort of those secret themes I was talking about, and that first you're focusing on yourself and then you're building these relationships with other people, so your attention has to extend to them. And then you've got middle age, so 30 to 64. You've got generativity versus stagnation. That is how you view yourself in society. So if you don't, accomplish something, you don't leave a mark on the world, then you feel like you've stagnated. You're not going to be growing or developing more. But if you feel like the usual examples they give are like starting a family, so you've got sort of a legacy to continue, or maybe a really important piece of work like writing a book, or securing a massive deal in your company that's going to sort of cement your name throughout time. And then you've got old age, which is integrity versus despair, where you essentially take a retroactive look at your existence and decide whether you've lived a good life or a bad life.
Oh, that's a deep one.
It is deep, but I think when you look at this theory, you can look at times in your life where you had these questions about yourself, where you questioned who you are, where you questioned whether you're leaving a mark on this earth, or you can see how in the future you might already have worries about looking back and thinking, like, did I live a good life and things like that. So I think it is quite relatable to developmental theory, but it's also very fluid. So it's not sort of, you've got to do this by this time or else you're screwed. You've got years of flexibility to sort of mark out that path for you.
Because leaving a legacy, could that just be as simple as just having a kid?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, for some people, it can be. But there's other people, who may be more career-driven or career-focused, where they want to be remembered for the work that they've done, or maybe a musician wants to be remembered by, like, making it onto the album chart, something like that. It's about, each step feeds into the next one. So it's figuring out who you are, figuring out how you want others to perceive you, figuring out your own place in the world, figuring out what you want to leave behind, and then the final step is sort of the review process, I guess. It's really interesting. Developmental psychology is one of my favorites. I absolutely adore it.
Mm.
And what do you think the process of, like, solidifying your sense of self actually is? Do you think it's about what you do, or do you think it's an acceptance of who you are, an acceptance of the things that you both like and don't like about yourself? Is it being integrated into a social group? Like, what do you think? And then what does any theories you looked at say about what does that process actually involve?
I think a lot of it is dependent on sort of how you've been raised, the environment you've been raised in, because you might have been raised in a very healthy, supportive family environment where just being told, like, you're trying your best and putting in the effort is enough for a lot of people, and that helps with building your own sense of self-identity, and that you're not going to be too overly self-conscious about a lot of things. You're quite secure in yourself. That person may develop through life and not win the lottery or write a book or anything like that. They might just live a long, happy life where they've made really nice connections with people, maybe raise a family, and that'll be enough for people. But then there's others where they may be raised in environments where they're constantly belittled by their family and friends, where they may not be more secure in who they are. They may end up raising children and repeating that same pattern of abuse, and then they're not going to be happy all the time. They'd have to reflect. I think there's a million different theories in which we sort of review and reflect on our lives or perceive, certain behaviors. And I think it is really, this is, the sort of cornerstone of developmental psychology, is that the best thing we can offer our families, our children, is a solid and secure, safe upbringing, because it does have ripple effects for the rest of their life. Freud talked about that. Jung talked about that. Every developmental psychologist has talked about that. I think it is just incredibly important that we raise children with that strong sense of self, that confidence to tackle the world and take on its challenges, and equip them with the emotional intelligence needed to deal with the bad times as well as the good.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree that you must create a safe environment for your own children to prosper and stuff. But how do you know that you're not then limiting them from how they can develop through difficulty? Because didn't Freud say that the good mother necessarily fails as well, in that the overbearing mother is actually will lead to disaster for the child as well. So there's a weird balance point you have to find.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same with anything in life, really. I would say that an overbearing mother would probably signify a more detached attachment style, as opposed to one that allows the child to sort of develop their own confidence, they're going to be very dependent on that mother then. So they're going to be less equipped to deal with life's challenges, like you said. But I think that there's a lot of individual difference between people. I think Freud's theories are quite restricted in that sense that he always talked about these things will happen as opposed to then they happen. And it's a slight pivot, but I think it's very important to remember that Freud and Jung were of a generation where the outlook on life was very pessimistic, very negative. They're just recovering from World War One. And pretty much all of their theories either look at explaining the negativity in life or attributing a sort of global consciousness where everyone reacts the same to certain things. It wasn't until after World War II where a lot of psychoanalysts moved out of Europe and to America where things were much more positive, that we start to really look at sort of the self and the individuality of life. So I think it's very easy to say that one approach to something can have this detrimental effect, but there's countless examples of people that have been grown up in horrible environment and have actually gone to live really healthy, successful, happy lives.
Yeah,
it's a bit, and especially not as a pet. I'm not a parent, so I can't even talk about the difficulties of raising a child. But there's definitely a lot of individual difference.
Yeah, and it kind of links to what we were saying right at the beginning about you have to view a person's experience within their own context. So yeah, there's always nuance in psychology. That's why a part of me doesn't like the fact that we always try and establish universal laws. Like, it's helpful because then it gives you a framework to work with when someone comes to you with a problem they're having or an experience they're having. You're like, well, this is what we've learned from studying people. But then I think it misses something we can't quite get a hold of, and we can't quite understand about life. That it's an individual process, even though we're all here on this same physical earth together, and how other people are a fundamental factor of what makes life worth living. Really, in the quiet hours, you're on your own, and you have the conversation with your own mind all the time.
Yeah, I think that's why in a lot of developmental theories, it is that idea of finding and identifying who you are in yourself. Building that sense of self-identity is often viewed as the most important aspect of developmental theory, because it equips you with the tools you need to go out and live a life that is reflective of you and your experience. And in a positive context, you've gained the tools, you've gained the confidence to take on the world as an individual person. Then in the negative, if you're unsure of yourself, unsure of your identity, unsure of your place in the world, that's going to lead to a lot of stress and anxiety and negative emotions going forward.
Yeah. So as 26 or so years old now, right as we are having this conversation on the 10th of December 2023, who do you think you are, and where do you see yourself moving forward? Like, what are those kind of cornerstones for your approach to life from what you know from like these theories of self and stuff? Is he gone?
Frozen again.
Oh, there we go. No, he's back. He's back. Can you hear us? Oh, we can hear you. But he's frozen.
Wait, for me, Finn's still frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen visually to me, but we can hear him.
That's fine. I would say that I've experienced a lot of ups and downs in my life, and I've been making a strong attempt to get back to a sense of stability. And I think that over my life, I always wanted to help people. I always saw myself as being a sort of doctor or potential clinical psychologist. And those are very lofty goals. I'm not saying that I might not become a clinical psychologist or a doctor one day. I think I just need to be secure in myself and what I'm doing. I'm helping people I'm sharing my experiences of my own mental health, and the work I'm doing is going to inform care for, people with MS, potentially on a global scale, which is incredible. I think it's very important that, whatever you do, even, I was talking earlier about working with Jacob at a restaurant, taking pride in what you're doing and being happy that you're having a positive effect on people's lives, even if it may seem like a small thing to you at the time. That's the most important thing in life for me, I think. It's just living a life where I'm having a net positive impact on the people around me. That's where I am. That's where I'm happy. And I think where I've got to in life now has facilitated me to be able to do that more effectively, more efficiently. So I think I'm on the right track. That's it.
That's beautiful, man. Beautiful message.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. Sometimes I've got it, sometimes I don't. It's tough. But life is a journey, and you do have to get through it. So try and help as many people on the way as possible. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm happy to call it there, Jake, unless you've got anything else to say.
I got sort of one more question, and it's just from my own lack of understanding. So when you're doing these studies, and probably Young and Freud did the studies, it just seems strange to me how this all works. Because is it the participants they just see something on an Indeed and then just wandered down into some experiment that they don't really know anything about, and then for your studies, they then have to starve themselves a little bit, and then the rate that woman and stuff. How does this realistically sort of work?
So if we're looking back to Freud and Jung, they used mainly case studies, which are not the most reliable, and also Freud and Jung were themselves not the greatest researchers on the planet. Freud had terrible cocaine addiction, and Jung was sleeping with his patients and also a narcissist.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah, quite well documented. So I think it's important to not sort of deify those characters, but that's a digression. As we moved into more modern psychology, sort of the golden age of psychology, which is the 1950s to the 1980s, you tend to have a lot more research coming out of American universities, which did have a lot more sort of framework around study participation. That is to say, the ethics weren't really there. There's loads of studies like Stanford Prison Experiment, Milgram study, where you find they wouldn't even come close to being allowed to be done today. But the way that research works now, especially clinical research, is usually it's a phone-up recruitment process, or an online sort of recruitment portal process. But university usually just open the opportunity out to students. Like I said, I had to complete research credits, so everyone's just signing up for it and get their hands on really. But in a medical setting, you have to sort of identify people that might be appropriate for the study. You have to give a lot of information, so they provide informed consent. And then there's often a lot of bureaucracy involved. You have to constantly be checking in, see if they still want to be eligible. I've worked in studies where people aren't necessarily able to give informed consent because they were suffering with quite severe psychosis. So it's about judging how lucid these people are and how able to make these decisions for themselves they are. There's lots of hoops to jump through, but it is generally just a process of finding appropriate people, informing them as much as possible, and just asking them if they want to take part.
I feel like it's quite a cool side hustle to do if you want to be a participant, because I can see myself going down to a study.
Yeah, you'd love it, Jake.
Honestly, just if you just look on local universities, and they will be opening research projects, you can just sign up. If you're eligible, you can sign up and get involved in the research process. I think it's an incredible thing to do. I literally took part in a study yesterday or Friday maybe. So I'm still thinking about research. I think it's a great thing to do. It definitely broadens your horizons. You get to learn about areas of work, areas of life that you never really open yourself up to. And yeah, I think it's an incredible opportunity.
Well, Finn, thank you.
Yeah, that's like it is. More than happy to be here.
Yeah, Mike's great.
For anyone listening, what is your mental health Instagram?
It's Moxon's Mental. I'll send a link to you if you want to post or anything. But yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening.